This lesson covers two water purification methods, reverse osmosis and filtration. Support for the development of this lesson has been provided by the National Science Foundation through the Ohio University Boat of Knowledge in the Science Classroom program. Let's look at the labels on some different bottles of water to see how the water was purified. We notice that of these three labels, two mention reverse osmosis as the method of purification. But we also notice other methods like distillation and filtration. Can you think of any other methods of water purification? When we think about water purification, we usually turn to proven methods that are found in nature. So how does nature purify water? We need to look at the hydrologic cycle to find out. Let's begin by looking at all the processes involved in the hydrologic cycle. We see evaporation, condensation, transportation, precipitation, deposition, sublimation, snowmelt runoff, transpiration, surface flow, infiltration, percolation, plant uptake, and groundwater flow. Which of these terms are you already familiar with? Which processes are similar? How does moisture enter the atmosphere? If we look back at the picture of the hydrologic cycle, we find three ways that moisture enters the atmosphere. Through evaporation, transpiration, which occurs as a result of plant uptake, and sublimation. Once the moisture is in the atmosphere, what happens? It goes through two processes, condensation and transportation. How does moisture return to the surface? Precipitation is one way that we are all familiar with, but moisture also leaves the atmosphere and returns to the surface through deposition if temperatures are cold enough. Once the water is back on the surface, it is transported. But how? It's important to remember that water is transported while on the surface and while underground. On the surface, water is transported through snowmelt runoff and surface flow in streams and rivers. Water transport underground occurs through groundwater flow, but the water must first go through infiltration and percolation to reach the groundwater level. Of all the processes we just mentioned, which do you think might help to purify water? Take a few minutes to think about what happens during each process and whether or not pollutants would be removed. When water evaporates, changing from a liquid to a gaseous state, it leaves behind many impurities. Some contaminants also get left behind during infiltration and percolation, since many particles are too big to fit between the soil particles. These natural processes lead us to water purification methods like filtration, distillation, and reverse osmosis, all of which apply natural principles to treat water in man-made facilities. Filtration is the most common method of water purification and is a very popular method for in-home purification systems. Filtration is the final step in the water treatment process before disinfection. Which natural process do you think filtration is most similar to? If you answered infiltration, you're correct. Filters, which are typically sand or carbon multimedia filters, retain contaminants while allowing clean water to pass through. Let's look at the difference between slow sand and carbon filters. Slow sand filters consist of a sand layer on top of a gravel layer. The water passes through these two layers slowly, which enables the granular material to retain most solid impurities in the water. These solids typically collect on top of the sand layer, forming what is called the Schmutzdecke. The term Schmutzdecke is German, meaning dirty layer. This layer consists of decomposing organic matter, iron manganese, and silica that serves as a zone for fine filtration and biological activity. Sand filters use physical means to remove contaminants. but carbon filters can remove undesirable materials physically and chemically. Like the sand filter, the carbon filter retains particles that are larger than the water molecules. But the carbon also adsorbs unwanted materials. Adsorption occurs because the atomic charge of the carbon is strong enough to break the particle's bond with water. The particles then adsorb or become chemically attached to the carbon. The other materials in the filter are added to increase adsorption. Filtration is capable of removing several contaminants. These include undesirable tastes, colors, and odors, hydrogen sulfide, radon, volatile organic compounds, chlorine and chlorine byproducts, pesticides, benzene, and harmful mineral deposits like arsenic and fluoride. As with any purification method, filtration has both pros and cons. Try to think of at least one pro and one con for filtration. As for advantages, filtration is the most effective purification method. It can remove both large compounds and small chemicals. Filters can even be used to selectively remove dangerous chemicals while leaving behind beneficial minerals. Additionally, filtration systems are cost-effective and waste relatively little water. But filtration is not a perfect process. It's often slow, and reduced contact time can result in only partial removal of contaminants. Also, the efficiency of contaminant removal is dependent on the type of filter that is used. Now let's move on to another water purification method, reverse osmosis. Before we can begin talking about reverse osmosis, we first need to understand what osmosis means. Has anyone heard the term osmosis before? Maybe you've heard about it in physical science class, or maybe in biology class. Osmosis is the diffusion of water across a selectively permeable membrane. Plant and animal cells both use this method to get water. During osmosis, water moves across the semipermeable membrane from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. If this is how we define osmosis, what do you think happens during reverse osmosis? Just like it sounds, the reverse or opposite behavior occurs. By applying pressure to the side with a high concentration, the water moves across the semipermeable membrane to an area of low concentration. We can see that this method enables us to desalinate water, leaving the salty brine on one side of the membrane and fresh water on the other side. Reverse osmosis is typically used for desalination, to purify salty water into drinking water. But reverse osmosis is also becoming more popular as an in-home purification mechanism. Watch this video for more explanation of water desalination. Besides salt, reverse osmosis is also capable of removing manganese, iron, fluoride, lead, and calcium. What do you think might be some pros and cons for reverse osmosis? Try to come up with one pro and one con. Reverse osmosis has one major advantage, that it's extremely effective for removing salts, natural minerals, and pathogens. But on the downside, it's not very good at removing some chemicals because they can also pass through the membrane if they are small enough. Reverse osmosis also removes important trace minerals while removing unwanted minerals. It tends to be a slow process and is not very efficient. If we compare filtration and reverse osmosis, we notice that the two processes are quite different in terms of contaminant removal and pros and cons. Filtration can remove more different types of contaminants, while reverse osmosis is very good at removing a few specific contaminants. As far as money is concerned, what factors can you think of that might influence the cost of filtration versus reverse osmosis? Which do you think costs more? Both are slow processes, but filtration relies simply on gravity, and reverse osmosis requires the application of pressure. This means that reverse osmosis requires an energy source, but filtration does not. We also know that filtration is more efficient than reverse osmosis, which discards 70 to 85% of the water that is coming in. Overall, filtration is the most cost-effective option, with savings of about $100 per year when compared with reverse osmosis. For more practice with filtration and reverse osmosis, you can complete the following activities that are included as part of this lesson.